Boo. Did I scare you? It's that time of year again. This Saturday night, October 31st, a dentist's dream and a parent's nightmare. Early in my life, I really enjoyed Halloween. It was a time where we could dress up and go out. As I've gotten older, when I moved out of college, I enjoyed living in apartments because I did not have to deal with trick-or-treaters. But now, since I've married and have children, I've kind of moved back to the area of enjoying Halloween again with our children. When our children were first born, or when they were younger, we were a little bit unsure. A lot of people we were hanging around kind of had Halloween as just kind of unsure how to treat that holiday or that event. And so we would sometimes go to grocery stores and grab all the candy. Some stores allow you to walk through them and get candy from the stores. But now, as they've gotten older, it's back to the fun stuff again. So we have a tradition of taking our kids to friends' houses, and then visiting the grandparents, or actually it's my grandparents, but our kids' great-grandparents. And then we visit the neighbors. This year, we'll be doing the same thing, but we're going to make it more fun at our house. My son has this idea of having a bunch of graves in the front yard, piles of dirt with crosses in them, and he wants to stand by the candy in a black clothes and just with his hand real still, hand over the candy and passing candy out that way to scare the little kids. I have thought it'd be better if we do something where a little bit more light is involved. But I want to just look at three things, or a couple of things of what I've observed from the 1960s, when I grew up in the 70s, to nowadays, just a comparison. Back then, now let me just clarify, I don't say it was better back then, because I think I have an image in my head when I was a child. But I think Halloween back then was more for children, and now it's it's for children, but it's also for adults. If you go look at the costume, if you go to Target or Walmart, they have a couple of aisles dedicated now to Halloween. And you can see a lot of the costumes are for adults. And I don't remember, I always thought it was kind of weird as a child when I saw an adult dressed up in a Halloween costume. Do you know what I'm talking about? And now in the 60s, and back then, a lot of the costumes were homemade. And we have a lot of kids come over to our house, and most of them, now there are some homemade ones, and they are really good. Better probably than we had. But most of them are more store-bought costumes. I remember as a child, actually I remember because my mom has all these pictures. I went as Tom Terrific, which most of you guys will not know was a cartoon character. Also, my brothers and I went as Mexicans. And we went as a cat, an elephant, a rabbit. We went as angels. And one year, my mom convinced my brother and I to go as Bonnie and Clyde. Yes, and I was Bonnie. She pulled out. I didn't know women wore these things, but I found out what women wore. I was 10 years old, and I had to put on. It was pretty hard for it. Can you imagine that age, 10-year-old boy having... Anyhow. Now, if you go to the store, a lot of I'm sure you've seen them. I was just kind of surprised, but they have these masks that are more grotesque-looking creatures. But I'm sure they were that back then as well. But the only thing I can remember back then were vampire teeth, the plastic vampire teeth that stuck together. And they didn't have blood. I just remember people using ketchup as blood. So, and then another difference is back then, now I was in a stage where people started to change, but back then you had a lot more of the homemade trick-or-treat items. Popcorn balls, candied apples, chocolate on sticks, and cookies. But now it's mostly wrapped candy, which is probably true about most schools. Now, real briefly, I'll tell you. Oh shoot, I'm running out of time. My favorite years, though, was the years my parents let us go by ourselves, because we would just run down the streets and grab all the candy we could get. And that one year, I was about 12. I collected a whole bunch of candy bars. I had them all laid out, about 30. I had 30 candy. I know I had a count of 30 candy bars, and our dog got into the candy and ate every one of my candy bars. And I was really mad but my mom was mainly mad because the candy bars decorated the rest of the house. So, I did not want to eat them after that. The last difference I've seen is back then they had Halloween parties, but now it seems they have more of what's called fall festivals. There's been a lot of change. It used to be Christmas parties, now it's holiday parties. I couldn't find a comparable for Easter. So, what will I be doing this Saturday? We'll be having fun with our family, welcoming our neighbors, and probably doing what my son wants to do. So thank you very much. Enjoy your Halloween.